every conference I go to is millwork owners and leaders talking about this of like, oh man, how do we get to where we can charge more? And so many of them honestly will say that, like, hey, we're doing it to ourselves because we're competing with each other, and we're all forcing the price down by offering that. And I think one of the worst things that can happen is you win one of those jobs that you bid low, right? And then you have to deliver it, and you're just going to lose your money. And then you've set the expectation that you're the cheap guy. And so it's hard to come back from that.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Welcome back, everybody, to Verify in Field. Today I have Ben Hudachek from BH Estimating, he's now a two-time guest. This is the second time we had him on early last year, I think. So I'll link it here in the show notes also for anybody that wants to go back and listen to episode 1, where he talks about his services and his journey into where you're at today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about BH Estimating's HRO, their hit rate optimization process, and how they help their clients with optimizing their hit rate, and discussing the industry trends since we last talked, and just having a fun conversation. So thanks for joining, Ben.
Yeah, Jacob, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
So maybe to get started, for those who haven't listened to your first episode, would you maybe give just a brief background and kind of what you do today, what BH Estimating does?
Yeah, so BH Estimating, we focus strictly on millwork estimating. So we have estimating services where we'll do estimating for companies on a job-by-job basis as they need it. We also provide training in the area of estimating, and we also do consulting for strictly focused on the estimating department. So those are kind of our three main services.
Awesome. And since we last talked, has anything changed any developments you've noticed in the industry, or things that you've been working on at BH Estimating with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, nothing major has changed, I would say. We still do the same services. I guess I have seen a little bit of an uptick in the need for training and consulting. Still do a lot of estimating for companies, but definitely over this past year, we've just seen a greater need in the area of training. There's a lot of companies that they either hire an estimator and just don't have the time to train them, or they need to bring someone from within the company and put them in the estimating position, and either don't have the know-how to train very well, or just don't have the time, to take the time that it takes to train someone. So we have a training program that we run through with estimators. We've seen it be really effective and really helpful for companies. And then also just the need for consulting in the area of estimating. I think it's kind of one of those often overlooked areas in a company. I mean, as you probably know this, Jacob, when you're running any sort of business, you kind of tend to focus on the areas of most urgency, can put out the fires that need to be put out. And the estimating department, in a good way, is less dramatic of a department, I've found. Less problems flare up. Problems tend to flare up when you're on a project trying to install, the deadline's coming, you're not getting it done. So you tend to focus on those areas of greater urgency. And so I think oftentimes we can overlook the estimating side of things. And so, but there's tremendous potential there in really optimizing the estimating department, getting it up and running like a well-oiled machine. There's a lot of growth that can happen by focusing on the estimating department. So yeah, we've just seen a lot more of that. People recognizing that need for growth in this area and optimization in the estimating department, being willing to invest in that department. So.
And I would imagine those, the need for training, the need for, people onboarding new estimators and optimizing the department all seems to be, a symptom of just industry growth in general. A lot of companies are growing or selling more or seeing more opportunities. I know from us on the drafting side, we've seen, especially the last, 3-4 months, beginning half of this year, is a lot of clients landing a lot of work. And, obviously before that comes the estimating and the sales and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in general, it seems like the industry, at least here in the US, seems to be picking up, and there's a lot of work to be had, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then combine that with the kind of labor shortage.
Yeah.
You kind of have that compounding problem of like, okay, we have this growth. We need people to be able to do this work. Where do we find them? Yeah. I mean, I read a statistic. I think it was like something like 3 million adults were thrust into early retirement due to COVID. So like there's all these people that have retired, and with that goes all this knowledge and this experience that they carried with them. So we have this kind of gap that we have to fill. And
I think probably more so in our industry, which trends towards, older career or later career individuals are in our industry. There's not a lot of younger people. So as those people hit retirement, it's a bigger impact, I think, to our industry.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, you talked about, so you help with training, you help with consulting, and in the consulting, you help kind of like you described making the estimating department run like a well-oiled machine. And I think a lot of times, I imagine you find, people may be apprehensive about bringing somebody from the outside, particularly in estimating. That seems to be like, people will outsource drawings or outsource fabrication or outsource install, but like estimating, am I estimating data? A lot of people hold that very close, and they're very apprehensive about letting somebody in, like that's their secret sauce. But it's also probably the department that has the least amount of resources and least amount of capacity to spend time optimizing and getting outside perspective on like how can we improve the process, but yields probably the most results from optimizing, wouldn't you say? So we're going to talk about today your hit rate optimization process, and I imagine that's very much focused on the optimization, kind of making the department run like an well-oiled machine. Can you talk a little bit about that specifically, the hit rate optimization, and how that yields and helps you refine the department as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. So like we mentioned earlier, growth, there's been a lot of growth, and growth is good. Like we always want to be growing. But with that growth comes a lot of problems. Problems are revealed, bottlenecks are revealed, right? And so as business owners, as business leaders, like we're constantly trying to run around tweaking things, getting those bottlenecks relieved. And so our HRO, or hit rate optimization, is one of those tweaks that we can make. It's definitely not a silver bullet, fix everything, but it's one thing that we can do to bring about improvement in the estimating department. And the idea is simple. The idea is, we have our hit rate, right? So the number of projects that we are awarded versus the number of projects that we bid on. So if we bid on 100 projects and we're awarded 10 of them, we have a 10% hit rate. And while there are a lot of factors that go into that hit rate, I think it's one of those things that we often use as an indicator. Like we can look at our hit rate, monitor our hit rate, and we need to do that. It's a good indicator to see the health of our business, especially our estimating. And when we can kind of hone in on that and focus on that and really try and actively try and improve that hit rate, we can bring about a lot of growth. And so the idea is that our estimators can be more efficient with their time, right? If you think about it, if your estimating department is bidding on $100 million worth of work a year, you have a 10% hit rate, let's say, you're being awarded $10 million per year. If you improve that hit rate, even just by a couple percentage points, up to 12%, you're still bidding on $100 million worth of work a year, you're going to be awarded $12 million worth of work. So there's a $2 million difference, even just in that 2% hit rate improvement. And so it can bring about a lot of change. Your estimators didn't have to bid on any more work, didn't have to work overtime. You didn't have to bring on any estimators. You just strictly improved the percentage of your award rate. And so now we do have to be careful with that, because if we use a simplistic approach, like let's just lower our prices and we'll win more work, you probably will win more work, but it's not going to be as profitable. So we want to avoid like a simplistic approach like that. So our approach, we just have 4 steps that we look at, 4 different areas that we look at to try and actively improve our hit rate. So the 4 steps that we use are just, the first one is tracking your past bid performance. The second one is analyzing your hit rate data. The third is just being more selective with what you bid on. And the fourth is really looking at your marketing, your messaging. And between those 4 steps, we can improve our hit rate in a healthy way, a way that's going to bring in more work, more profitable work, and with the same amount of effort in our estimating department. So jumping back into number 1, just tracking your past bid performance. That's the first step. Like, we really just need to start just keeping track of the projects that we're bidding on. And most companies are already doing that, keeping track of the bids, which ones are awarded and which ones are not, which ones are still pending, and using that to kind of follow up, talk to the contractors, find out where we're at, and then even when they have lost the project, but to find out some information, like how much did we lose by, or who was awarded the millwork, and kind of thing. We encourage people to go a little bit deeper, even in that, tracking that data. So really keeping track of a lot of different parameters on a project, more than just the name of the project and the price of your bid. So we encourage to keep track of a lot of different parameters, like what kind of cabinets it was, what kind of countertops it was there wall paneling, what kind of wall paneling was it, was there trim, was it paint grade, was it stain grade, was the project AWI certified, and all those different parameters. When we keep track of that, it gives us a lot more information, because it's a little bit of work up front, like keeping track of it. But if you get in a healthy habit of just tracking all those bids, we actually have a dashboard available on our website for people if they want to download. It's free. It's really helpful. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. If you go to bhestimating.com/dashboard, you can download that dashboard. It's it's just an Excel spreadsheet, nothing fancy, but it helps you keep track of all of those parameters on the project. And then we have a dashboard that you can kind of toggle the different key areas, and you can start to analyze that data. So brings us to like step number 2, is really analyzing that hit rate data. So kind of delving in a little bit deeper. So, okay, we have our 10% hit rate, or 12% or 15%, and really diving into that. And we can start to look for trends. When we really analyze that data, we can look for trends, like what's bringing our hit rate down? Like, is there a certain type of project? Is there a certain contractor that we're bidding with that we're just not winning much of their work? We can start to look for those trends. One example is a company we worked with. We noticed when we started keeping track of their bids, really analyzing the data with them, we noticed that it was really skewed. Projects that had a lot of wall paneling, they were losing more often than projects that did not. So by analyzing that data, it points us in the right direction. Like, we can know where to look, where to focus in on. And so we looked at their wall paneling, and we just realized that their pricing was just extremely high on their wall paneling. They had a very efficient shop. They did great on projects that had a lot of wall paneling. It's just their pricing was really high. So we did end up tweaking that pricing a little bit, and that was able to bring their hit rate up, especially on projects that had wall paneling. So if you're keeping track of your past bids and really analyzing that data, that can give us a lot of information, and we can really use that information to make more informed decisions. Keeping track of your bids doesn't give you the answer, but it points you in the right direction to look at, and we can really hone in on those areas. And then the third step is just being more selective with your bidding. We always encourage people, like, don't just bid on everything. I know that we often get overwhelmed with bid invitations as millwork companies, especially if you're a good millwork company. You're going to get a lot of invitations, too many invitations than you can handle. And so we really want to be selective. And so if we're keeping track of those past bids, and then we also can look at projects that we've completed in the past and which ones are really good fits for our company. What fit really well in our wheelhouse, right? Like, we're really good at this type of cabinet, this type of project. And what we can start to do is really hone in and actively seek out that kind of project, and focus on those and prioritize those. So it's not to say that we don't bid on the type of projects that we don't like necessarily, but when we're being more selective, we can prioritize those projects that really fit well in our wheelhouse. And that goes a long way in improving our hit rate and improving our company across the board. If if we're bringing in projects that are not good fits for our company, like it's going to cause a lot of problems down the entire chain all the way through. But if we're bringing in projects that are really good projects, good fits for our company, then it can bring a lot of growth. We can bring a lot of profitability all the way through the chain. So yeah, it's just being really selective with your bidding and doing it in a healthy way. It's hard. I know it's hard to turn bid down. It really is. It's hard to say no. And especially when it's, the contractor, he's your buddy, he's calling you up and can you bid on it, please, please. But if it's really not a good fit, like you have to learn how to say no. You can say no graciously, but we do have to learn to be more selective. We have to look at every bid as an investment, right? We're investing our time. Our estimators are spending time. They're spending time and effort on every single one of those bids. And so just like with any investment, we need to calculate the risk, right? And so if we know which projects are a really good fit for our company, then we can prioritize those. We know that the risk is less, and that it's a better investment of our time and our resources. So so in order to do that, in order to really set up your wheelhouse and know what's a good fit, you need to keep track of your projects. You need to keep track of the projects that you've actually been awarded, which ones went really well, which ones didn't go so well, and then of course diving into the problems of like, well, why didn't it go well? Was it the type of project? Was it an internal issue? What was that problem? But really building that wheelhouse and really knowing what fits well for your company. This is something we work with too with our companies that we work with, is really honing in on that. Like what is a good project for you? It's different for each company. Each company has their own niche. Each company has their own specialties. And we can really help just kind of hone in on that and really develop that and flesh that out so that when we're bombarded with those bid invitations, we know those key points that we're looking for, the key types of projects, the key contractors that we like to work with and that work really well with our company, key locations, the scope of work, all those different parameters. We can sort through the bid invitation and turn the ones down that we don't want with more confidence. And we can really invest and bid on the ones that we do want with more confidence when we have the more information to make those more informed decisions. So, the fourth point is just improving your marketing. So I know that we, especially with millwork companies, tend to kind of go with the grassroots marketing, word of mouth, which is great. And I think that we often don't even necessarily associate estimating with marketing. But what I've found is with a lot of smaller millwork companies, like they don't have a marketing department. They may outsource a marketer, but estimating really is on the front end of the business, right? Like usually the estimating department is the first point of contact for a project, for a new contractor, even the owners of the projects themselves. And so it's really a great place to really hone in our messaging. Like, how are we talking about our company? How are we portraying ourselves? So it's often something that we don't think too much about, but like we live in a digital age, like everybody's checking out your website. Like, I know we necessarily don't think about it too much. Like sometimes we just slap together a website and put it up there, but everybody's reading it, and you better believe those contractors that have never heard of you, like they're Google searching you, right? And we're going to check out your website. And so what's on your website? Like, is it effective? Is your messaging like clear? Is it concise? And does it really portray like who you are as a company? And really kind of honing in on that messaging. Oftentimes we tend to think that like the biggest factor that a contractor is looking for on a project is just the price. And so we're really like fighting to bring our price down and just be the lowest bidder so that we can be awarded the project. And that's often just not the case. Like smart contractors aren't necessarily looking for the lowest bidder. I mean, there are certain types of projects where they're required to take the lowest bidder. But in general, like good contractors are looking for so much more than just the lowest price. And really it comes down to the number one thing is trust. Like, do they trust you as a company? Can you get the job done? Or is it going to be a complete flop? And ultimately the contractor is looking out for their own reputation. They're the face of, like, they're speaking to the owners, and if the project failed, it's on them, right? So they don't want to bring on a millwork company that's going to be a flop or going to be a failure. So ultimately, they have to know that they can trust you, and trust goes way further even than price. And so I think you had a couple of past episodes where you guys were talking about pricing and just the importance of not necessarily being the lowest price, but actually charging what you're worth and charging well. And so I think that goes a long way in really making sure that your company is profitable and not getting into that rat race, the race to the bottom, right? Because that's what it is. When you start trying to compete strictly in price, it's a race to the bottom, and nobody wins that race ultimately. So, Oh, go ahead.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I've, every conference I go to is millwork owners and leaders talking about this of like, oh man, how do we get to where we can charge more? And so many of them honestly will say that, like, hey, we're doing it to ourselves because we're competing with each other, and we're all forcing the price down by offering that. And I think one of the worst things that can happen is you win one of those jobs that you bid low, right? And then you have to deliver it, and you're just going to lose your money. And then you've set the expectation that you're the cheap guy. And so it's hard to come back from that. But I think I really like the four aspects of your strategy that you outlined. And ultimately, what it sounds like, kind of in summary, is your hit rate optimization is kind of maximizing the effectiveness of your efforts in estimating. I think a lot of times people focus on efficiency and they lose sight of effectiveness. And it seems like what you're focusing on here is how do we make all of our efforts as effective as possible, and not how do we just bid more work? Because I think that's easy, is like, oh, well, I want to win more work. Let me bid more work. Let me hire more estimators. But if that's not an option, or you don't like, hey, I don't think that that's what I need, how do I become more effective at the work we do bid? And it sounds like it starts with just looking at your history, looking at the information you already have, tracking it better so that you can see trends, like you said, and then refining from there.
Yeah, and another thing with the marketing is really is more of just your messaging too, even more so than creating good looking business cards or having a good looking website. But really, when you find your niche in your wheelhouse, like, you have something to go off of, right? You have a specialty, and when you can really portray that specialty and really speak to that specialty, like, ultimately contractors, like, you have to put yourself in the place of the contractor, right? And on bid day, it's chaos, right? They're probably getting hundreds of proposals in from all the different trades, and they have to sort through it, and they have to decide on which ones to use and what goes into that decision. Ultimately it comes down to trust. And if they know that you're going to come through, they're more likely to put your number on that proposal, even if it's not the lowest one. And and it's also, like, one thing that I've seen, and this is not to be critical, but I've seen a lot of websites from the work companies, and frankly, most of them are just not very effective as a website. Like, your website should be a selling tool. Like, it's marketing collateral, right? And oftentimes what I've seen is, most of the time we focus on either the story of the company, such and such millwork was started in 1968 by my grandfather and his brother Billy, and they did work out of their garage, which is great. Like, we should tell our story, but it's not necessarily an effective means of communicating message of your company well. And I what I've found is, just if we can be a solution to a problem, that goes such a long way. Like, contractors, like I said, bid day is chaos, right? And what they want is someone who's going to ease that chaos. They want someone who's going to solve a problem. And so if you can clearly communicate what that problem is and how you can solve it, that goes a long way. We have a company that we worked with, and they pick up, like, a lot of those, like, they specialize in picking up all those little miscellaneous subcontracts that are loosely associated with millwork, all the decorative metal, all the glass, all the countertops, and even, like, additional items that aren't associated with millwork, but they pick up all of those subcontracts and they include it in their price. So they're the ones that are dealing with all the little tiny subcontracts, and they use that as a selling point. Like they present that to the contractors, and that goes a long way, right? Like if you can approach a contractor and say, like, all those little subcontracts that you can't stand dealing with, like, we handle all that. Like we deal with all of them. We include them in our price so that you don't have to worry about it. You can focus on the other areas and really make your project a success and win the day with your project. You don't get caught up with dealing with all those little subcontracts. That goes a long way, and it also gives you something to talk about when you're at those awkward subcontractor luncheons, when you rub shoulders with the project managers and like, well, who are you? Who are you with? And instead of just kind of an awkward, like, oh, I'm with such and such company, and, company was started in 1986, and blah, 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 blah. You can really have something that's like an effective way of communicating who you are and what you do. And that goes a long way.
Yeah. So, I just had a thought that, so you mentioned a couple of times, the bid day is crazy. And I think for those of our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with from the GC's side, what that bid day looks like what is it they're doing? Because I think there's probably people in estimating in millwork shops today that don't really understand from the client side. I think that's important to understand because just like you said, like the real thing that all of us are doing is solving a problem for our clients. And if we're doing that more effectively than the next guy, whether that be by price or service or quality or schedule or whatever it is, it's how can you solve a problem and do it in a way that makes it easier for the GC to say yes to you than the other guy? That's really what it comes down to. And so can you explain a little bit about what that looks like? What is happening on a bid day for a GC? And, they're collecting all these vendor bids and things like that, or subs. But can you walk us through that process and like how that understanding that and how like as a bill worker, as a subcontractor, we can kind of make that go more smoothly?
Yeah, for sure. And mostly it's just like finding out from your contractors, from your customers, like what is important to them. But yeah, the bid day, like it can be crazy, like they do as much work as they can. They've spent the last few weeks or months like really preparing their bid sheet, like getting ready, speaking with subcontractors, making sure that they understand the project and making sure that you're all on the same page as far as scope and materials and the different breakdowns that they want to see on the pricing. So there's a lot of preparation work, but, most companies, like they're down to the wire. So they're submitting I'm talking about subcontractors here, that we're submitting our pricing at the last minute. We're trying to give as much notice as possible and give it to the contractors as early as possible. But for the most part, the day of the bid, like they're getting all of these proposals in from all of the, all the different divisions, right? And so they have to sort through those, and they have to know, like you get the random proposals in from such and such millwork that they've never even heard of, and their price is ridiculously low. Do you include it? Do they have everything? Like there's not enough time. I mean, you may have time for a quick phone call, but there's not necessarily the time to really run through the entire project and make sure that they have everything included. Make sure that they're pricing the right materials and that they're factoring all the different factors into the project. So you just have to make a quick decision. You have to decide, like, are we going to use their low price? It's tempting because it's low and we could have a competitive advantage, but I don't know this company or we've done minimal work with them. And so there again, it comes down to that trust factor. And if price is not your biggest factor in a particular project, smart contractors will choose the company that they know will get the job done. They know that they can trust. They have a good history of their proposals, their bids being good, being full. They've included everything. They've thought it through. They've even included the things that weren't shown in the plan, but they know are going to need to be included, So if there's a company that they're familiar with, that they understand what they do, and that a millwork company brings some specialty to the table. There's a millwork company that really specializes in hospitals, and they're bidding on a hospital job. Like they're more likely to lean towards that millwork company because they have a specialty in that area, and they know that they're going to bring not only their price and their scope to the project, but they're also going to bring a lot of knowledge that they can talk with that millwork company and ask for their advice and see what else they can bring to the table. And so And there's really kind of 2 points. So there's bid date, right? Like, does your number get on their bid schedule or not? Like, are you on the list? Did you make it in their proposal that they sent to the client, to the customer? That's 1 point. So you do want to get on that. That's a great starting point. But then, so say they're awarded the project, estimators hand it over to the project manager. Project managers can make their own decisions. They can go down that list and they're like, well, I know Bob from Bob's Millwork, and we know that he'll do a good job. So I'm going to choose him. Even though they use this other price, I'm going to choose this Bob's Millwork, and I'm going to talk to Bob. And if his price is a little high, I can probably work him down. So there's that second point. Are you actually, is the project manager or whoever's running the project, are they actually choosing to use you on the project? So there's kind of those 2 points. And that's why it's important that we have good messaging about our company, and that we're speaking to really everybody in the general contractor, like not strictly the estimators. Like normally, as millwork estimators, we're speaking mostly with the estimators of the general contractor, but we do also want to make sure that we're communicating our message to the entire general contractor, and making sure that we get on that second point of contact, that we're actually getting onto the project. Because I've experienced that numerous times, right? You start talking with the estimator, and that they included your price in their proposal, and then there's this dead silence, right? You don't hear anything, and you can't get a hold of the project manager, and next thing you know, the project is finished, and you did not get awarded the project. So really, those are the 2 key times where you really want to make sure that you get onto their proposal, and that you actually get the subcontract, right? And again, like the kind of common thread between the 2 of those is trust, is really trust. And so you really want to build that trust with the contractors and work on that.
So I think something that you touched on that is important is, the idea that on bid day, there's only so much time for a contractor to go through all the bids, for any given trade. So millwork, right? And they're getting bids from your competitors, people that they're, going against, and there's only so much time for them to follow up and ask questions. And if you already have a good relationship and that GC already knows, oh, they're really good at hospitals, this is a hospital, I know they've got everything included there, I trust that. If you're not that guy, you don't have that relationship, and maybe you're a millworker that's trying to get in with a new GC or a new type of job, do you have any recommendations as far as how to present your proposal to give confidence? Hey, I've got everything, to differentiate, or to say, like, it's not just price. Because I know a lot of mill workers are hesitant to give any more information than that final price, right? And it's like, we don't want to overcommit, we don't want to overcommunicate, we want to give ourselves leeway. But I think that can work against you just as much, to some extent. So do you have any recommendations on how do you present your bid? How do you present your scope? Like, hey, I've got everything included to be thorough.
Yeah, no, and you need to make sure that your scope is clear and that your bid proposal is clear. And that's really the biggest thing, is clarity and being concise. Like on bid day, like they don't have time to read through like a 6-page proposal. Like you need to make sure that your proposal is 1 page, and then your scope can be a few pages depending on the size of the project. But that proposal needs to be 1 page, and it needs to be clear what you're including and what you're not including. And you need to be very clear about that. And more so even than strictly the proposal is what leads up to that. Like, have you been communicating with the contractors? Have you asked, informed questions about the project? Have you, given them the indication that you're familiar with the project and that you are actually looking at it and that you're not just spitting out a number? And making sure that you, as a millwork estimator, are being thorough, and that you're really looking at the project up front, early on. You're sending in those RFI questions before the RFI deadline, and really, you're actually helping the contractor, right? If you're asking questions early enough about the cabinets, and asking about those areas where there's a gap in the plans and specs, or there's ambiguities, or there's conflictions between the plans and the specs. If you're asking those questions, you're helping the contractor already, even before you submit your proposal. You're helping them by giving them resources. You're giving them questions to ask about the project and bringing up things that may be potential problems down the road.
Or maybe,
so it starts even long before you submit your proposal.
Well, I imagine those questions also make them think, oh, is my other mill worker thinking about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's where you can already start to show your expertise in the project
Yeah.
is even long before your proposals are submitted. But yeah, again, going back to that clarity, like you want your proposal to be clear and concise. And I mean, I know that there's some advantage in not sending your proposal in too early in the sense that, because what can happen is, let's say you send your proposal a few days before the bid. Contractors shouldn't, but they could potentially take your bid and your scope and send it to other lower companies and say, hey, do you have all this? Can you match this price even, which is pretty shady and they shouldn't be doing, but it does happen sometimes. But even your scope, like if they take your scope that you put all this work into and they send it to other contractors. And so there's an advantage in not sending your proposal in too early. There's also an advantage in making sure that they have it with enough time to review it and ask questions and give you a chance as a work estimator to make any changes, revisions, and add the scope that they want you to include or take things out that they want you to take out, or give them the different breakdowns that they need for their proposal. A lot of times it's not just one lump sum. Like they have to have a base bid price and then numerous alternates, and they need to see the different alternates broken out. So they have to make sure that all of their subcontractors are breaking out their pricing equally so that on bid day, they can take those 5 or 6 prices, whatever it is, and plug them into their proposal sheet in the different breakdowns that they need. So, it is a balance. We don't want to get it too early. We don't want to get it too late. So, in that you kind of have to just play it by ear, but I would lean toward getting it to them a little earlier so that they have time to review it. You have time to review it. And yeah, there's a chance that you might be helping out your competitors, but it's a chance that we take, And there again, if a contractor is doing that to you over and over again, and you start to see that, the projects that this particular contractor is winning, your hit rate is really low with them, then you may want to not bid to them anymore, But if there's a contractor that you're winning a lot of work with and you really have a good partnership, especially in these instances, I would lean towards getting your proposal in a little bit early and giving them a chance to review it before midday when it's chaos, when they have time to breathe. And a lot of that comes down to, a lot of times our estimators are so overwhelmed, like they're bidding on so many projects. They're not getting into the projects early enough to look for those RFI questions and get them in on time. They're getting into the project last minute because they're so swamped with work. And so that's where if we can optimize our hit rate and we can kind of relieve a little bit of that pressure for our estimators, they can spend more time on the projects that they're bidding on and do a better job. Get into them earlier, look for those questions, take the time to review the project with the contractors ahead of time. Like we need to make sure their estimators have enough time to be able to do that on their projects and really bid well. And you can do that when you know that you have a better chance of winning this project. If your hit rate is more towards 25, 30%, like you can take a little bit more time on those estimates and really delve into them a little deeper. But when you're having to bid on so many projects just to bring in enough work to keep your shop busy, it's hard. It's hard to spend that much time on the projects and be that thorough. So
in your talking about hit rate optimization, you talked about, the quantity of projects. Is there any consideration for project size at that is there any recommendation you have for that? Like, are you also looking at, I mean, I know a lot of mill workers kind of have a comfortable range that maybe they're similar, but obviously you don't want to just win a ton of tiny projects and lose a lot of big projects, right? How do you take that into account when you're going through this process?
yeah, I mean, and that's really comes down to each individual company. Like you said, like most companies kind of know their happy place of like the size of a project. It definitely is a factor. I mean, you definitely don't want to bite off more than you can chew, right? Like you don't want to bid on a project that's too big for your company and you won't be able to complete it. You don't have the labor to complete it on time and to complete it well. So definitely have to look at that. That is definitely a factor. I do like to encourage diversify. Like you shouldn't only be winning and bidding on huge projects. I think it is healthy for an organization to have smaller projects to fill those gaps And again, that depends on your business model and how your company is run. But for the most part, we do like to have a good, healthy variety in the size of our projects, which then also is the same for a lot of areas. Like we don't want to be strictly in one industry. Like it is good to have some diversification in the type of projects that we're bidding on and hopefully being awarded. But yeah, the size wise, definitely. I mean, you really have to look at your capacity. So you really have to be looking at your schedule, what's coming up. So this project that we're looking at bidding on is a larger project. When will it start to take place? When's the completion date? What does our backlog look like for that time period? And would we be able to even take this project on and complete it? So really, it's a combination of looking at your schedule and also just looking at the size of your company. Like, can you handle it? I like to picture, and I like to encourage companies to look at slower, more long-term growth rather than kind of the ups and downs. I mean, I know that there's ups and downs like naturally in the industry, but if we can look at more slow and steady growth over a period of time is better. You can start to build up your employee base. You can start to build up those resources, your capacity, get a bigger shop if you need to, get like a warehouse for storage if you need to, rather than the kind of sporadic, like, let's bid on this huge project, we win this huge project, hire a bunch of people, and then that project's completed, and then, right, what do? You're going to lay off half your crew? And that's not fun at all for anybody. So, yeah, if you can work your way up to those larger projects and make sure that you have the capacity to take them on, like definitely want to be growing. Like I don't want to put a limit on our company and say we're only bid on projects of this size. Like we do want to encourage that growth. Like that capacity should grow over the years. We want to be growing. Otherwise we're, not very successful. We definitely want to be growing as a company.
Awesome. Well, from your perspective, kind of holistically, are there any trends we talked about earlier? You're seeing a lot of people onboarding new estimators, whether that be from externally or, promoting from within. Are there any other kind of challenges or opportunities that you're seeing that companies should be aware of, in the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I would say, like, be aware of what you're not seeing, those kind of hidden problems, and not even necessarily problems per se, but hidden bottlenecks, hidden areas where we could be experiencing growth that we're not. And like I mentioned earlier, like the estimating department that happens a lot. I kind of like to look at it as I used to run a Weinig molder, right? The four-sided planer, and you get the machine up and running, you get it humming, you get everything running efficiently. And then you got to make sure that your outfeed is set up so you got people that are going to stack the lumber when it comes out. And then once you get the machine running, oftentimes the bottleneck is you can't keep it fed fast enough, right? And feeding that machine in, it's all coming out, and you just can't keep it running. You want that machine to be running at full capacity constantly. Like you don't want those downtimes. And so what I had to do was really look ahead and really get all my ducks in a row. You like that, Jacob? Get your ducks in a row. Ahead of time, right? Sort out your boards. And so you're not running in these huge boards and jamming the machine and then you got even more downtime. It's really getting your ducks in a row and focusing on the in-feed. Like you'll find that once you get the machine up and running, that's the area that you really need to focus on. And that's what I encourage companies to do. And that's what I've been seeing is that companies are really, like investing in their estimating departments. I think they're starting to be greater awareness in how we grow our businesses and where those pain points are and where those areas of potential growth are. And I think there's a greater awareness of the potential growth in the estimating department. And that's a good thing in my opinion. And so I do like to encourage that. It's really kind of get out of the rat race, like take a step back from your business, especially if you're the business owner. There's so many things that are bogging you down and taking your attention. But if you can break away from that for a little bit and really step back and look at your business overall as a machine and really start to look for those areas that maybe aren't screaming, like they're not these great fires and dramatic events, but these areas that are potential areas of growth that we're just overlooking, that we're just not seeing because we're so caught up in the day-to-day and putting out fires. Is really just step back and take a look at those areas that there could be some growth and really be willing to invest in those areas and pour into those areas, whatever that looks like. Like it might be training. It might be the estimators just don't have the training. Like maybe they were brought up from inside the shop and they have great experience with working with millwork and building things and even installing, but they don't have the computer savvy. They don't have the business savvy of really understanding, what goes into pricing and how we should be submitting our proposals and what we should be including and kind of thing. Or they don't have the necessary sales skills, right? Like there's a little bit of sales that goes into estimating as well, like how you talk to customers, how you sell your proposal, how you respond to, well, your price is higher, why should I choose you? We gotta have a little bit of sales savvy, so maybe your estimators just need some training, or they need some of those kind of resources and to really pour into them to really optimize that department and get it up and running and then hopefully the bottlenecks will shift down the line and you can go back to focusing on those problems. That's how we go about growth, right? These little tweaks here and there. There's usually not one big silver bullet that's going to fix everything, and we'll experience this exponential growth. Like it's tweaks. So
Awesome. Well, Ben, I think you've shared a lot of really great advice and a lot of great insight specifically on estimating and business development. If people are interested in reaching out and finding out more about everything you've shared, about how they can work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, best way is probably just check out our website. So BH Estimating, so B as in boy, H as in Hector, estimating.com. Or you can email me directly, Ben, BEN, at bhestimating.com. Those are two great ways to get in touch with us. And if you need a dashboard, head over to bhestimating.com/dashboard. And you can download our dashboard for free. And it's a great place to just get started with a lot of these concepts and really start tweaking and honing in on improving your get rate.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure we link that in the show notes. So it's easy. If you're listening to this, you should be able to go to the show notes and go right to that dashboard or that website. Ben, as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you and chatting about your expertise and about the industry. So I hope I'll have you again on in the future. Maybe we can check back in and see how things are going in a year.
Yeah, that would be great. And Jacob, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate everything you do with this podcast. I've talked to so many people who listen to your podcast and who love it, and it's been a great help. The millwork industry there's not a lot of resources out there for us. And so having this podcast has just been amazing. I've learned so much from the different guests that you've had on and different expertise that they bring to the table. So I appreciate everything you're doing, Jacob. And
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you having me on. It's been an honor. I love it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verified in Field.